How you doing, sir?
Good, doing well.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me. Appreciate it. Now, where are you today, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm in Dallas, Texas, at my home for the moment.
All right. Well, yeah, again, thanks for joining me. And, this is exciting for me. It's also obviously a very serious time, with Black Lives Matter and the quest for social justice and ending systemic racism. And so, you told a story in Sydney that was very moving to me, and I know everybody who was there. And I've also been a fan of what you've accomplished professionally and how it's been rooted in development and getting better. And now you're I wouldn't even call it a transition. You're doing other things in addition to TrainUp and KnowledgeFlo, with these stories. So for those who, haven't been introduced to you, you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and TrainUp and KnowledgeFlo a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm Jeremy Tillman. Thankful to be here, Al. It's always an honor and a privilege, and I really appreciate what you're doing at PAFOW and just how you've embraced everything that's happening in our country and in our world to try to make it a better place through what you're doing and through people data. So I'm the founder and CEO of TrainUp.com and KnowledgeFlo. I started TrainUp.com in 2004 as a career training marketplace. We've had more than 60,000 companies purchase training from us over these last years. It's been really a joy. Wow. And I always like to introduce kind of and tell my why I do what I do, and then a little bit about what we do. But for me, our vision is to empower growth and shape the future of learning through innovative training solutions. I came from that stereotypical, you would say, African-American story where single parent home, mom struggled with substance abuse. If you know the stats, 65% of African-American homes are single parent homes versus 24% for white Americans. And so it's a big divide there. And that was part of my story. And yet my mom really cared about education and she instilled that in us. She actually had a bachelor's in business and was working on her MBA before substance abuse kind of kicked in a little bit. And all of my brothers and sisters went to college. We didn't all graduate, but everybody did in our household. And that wasn't really typical. And so I just believe that learning is the only thing that can take someone from where they are today to where they want to be tomorrow. And so I've really dedicated my life to that through TrainUp.com. And KnowledgeFlo is really this next gen approach to continuous learning and continuous performance management. Mm-hmm. We're not going to become better at any subject or any area of our lives by just getting information or just taking a single training course. That growth and learning journey is more than just the content. And so we're really developing this next gen platform to facilitate that learning journey and learning experience from taking someone from where they are today to really moving along that journey of becoming a better supervisor or better leader or whatever those topics might be. And so really exciting stuff and great work that we're getting to do. But, this discussion today is bigger than the work that either of us are doing.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's also the case where, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not mutually exclusive either, right? Because, if there is more opportunity, if there's even access to the opportunity, then there can be a better chance for Black people in America who have been hamstrung, for lack of a better way to put it. I think you'll agree, just because there hasn't been that access, to opportunity. And let me set the stage a little bit before we get into it. I just talked about what's happening here in Santa Cruz, and I think you'll be a fan of this. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's the first city in the United States that will not use predictive policing. So that was just announced this past week. And I got really excited because, as I just pontificated on, is the data is inappropriate. It's going to perpetuate profiling and the norm that we want to get out of. So my pointed question to you, what do you think has to shift, not only in society when we talk about policing, but for organizations to think, okay, this is too big for me to handle. This is not, maybe I don't have a role to play. That's something that society will take care of. I mean, do you believe that businesses, organizations have a role to play in bringing about a more just, equitable society?
That's a great question. Of course, companies and businesses and business leaders have a role to play. That's where the majority of everyone in the world, not just Americans, spend their majority of their time at their workplace. So if their workplace isn't part of the solutions, then it's only going to drive the problem deeper. But it's a little more complicated than that. I really have this community based approach to some of the issues that we face. And I think that everyone has a role to play in the solution. It's not just on companies. It's not just on leaders. It's not just on our police or our government. It really is on us as people, as humans, and really wanting to make our world a better place. And so it's a big animal. I mean, when you think about equality, I'm kind of famous for saying that the United States of America is not a land of equal opportunity. Mm-hmm. And I'll just pause for a minute and let that sink in. I've been known to say that America is not a land of equal opportunity, but I believe that it's a land of ample opportunity. And I think a lot of times when we approach these subjects, we want to get to some equitable solution quickly. That's not how any solutions have happened over any period of time in anything great that's happened. What's happened is that it's a lot of hard work, and the people doing the hardest work at the beginning are suffering the most to provide an outcome that's going to be better for people down the road. And I think in our organizations, we also have to realize that the work that needs to be done isn't going to be something that's going to happen overnight. And it's going to take some sweat equity right now, maybe more than a statement on a website.
Mm-hmm. I 100% agree, unsurprisingly. I have this, as a 52-year-old man, I don't ever want to be a cynic. At the same time, I see many people enamored by the news cycle of the day, and if they don't like it, they'll just wait it out and just get back to what they're doing. I think that's true, like with COVID-19 and the impatience Americans are showing with that, but also arguably with the unrest that has resulted with the murder of George Floyd. It's been, okay, this is gonna blow over. What do you say to those? So you're right. It can't just be a statement on a website. There needs to be work done. What does that work look like to you?
Yeah. Now this is, I'm actually writing a whole series of Black stories that I'm going to be launching in our new Training Flow for Content format. It's almost like this blog 2.0 type of thing where it's not enough just to write. It's about engaging and walking people along the journey and involving ourselves in the story. What it's going to take is getting our hands dirty. I'll tell you one of the stories that I'm writing about. And really, I still think that we have to continue to raise awareness. I don't know that we really fully understand what happened in the past and what's happening in the present, because some of these things around race and equality are just so programmed into our nature that we don't even know. So I'll give you an example. When I was 15, I left home to go to the Alabama School of Math and Science. It was kind of a boarding school where you live on campus, take college level classes, and all the students around the state could apply. You would take the SAT early, and they accepted the top 140 students in the state. And you go and you live on campus and you took college level classes. So here I am as a 15-year-old. My mom found out about this school, encouraged me to go. It was really critical to my educational journey. The very first day, I go to the cafeteria. Only 144 students were accepted in my class, and I think 130 for the class before. So we're talking less than 300 students on campus. I walk into the cafeteria, I get my tray, and I'm running a little late, typical JT style. And I get my tray and I turn around. And the first day, I have a decision to make, because right in front of me is a table and it has 5 African Americans sitting together. There's only like 8 or 9 African Americans on campus. and 5 or 6 of them are sitting together at a table. And I look out, and there's 100 plus white students sitting together. I didn't come to the school to think about race. The thing that we had in common is that we're all smart. But thrust upon me was this decision that I had to make that had to ultimately do with race. Will I look the African-American students in the eye and walk right past them? Would I decide to sit with them? Is there a level of comfort there that I might find? Do I want to go and sit by myself and hope that someone else joins me? These are the things that we don't think about in the nuances that happen in our lives. And so you may have to wait to read the story to find out the decision that I made. But
I was going to ask.
That's the greatest book ever, right? No, but what we're doing in the blog is I'm asking people, what would you have done, or what should I have done? Because I don't believe there's a right or wrong answer. You know, I did choose to go and sit with the white students because I felt like my whole life I'd been a bridge builder. In Alabama, I was people's first Black friend ever. And this wasn't that long ago. And so sometimes things happen and we're not even aware of what's going on. So in our corporations and in the culture that we built, there are companies that are old, there are companies that are new, there are companies that are 10, 15, 20 years old. Every company has a culture and an identity. And sometimes we stumble upon our identity. We stumble upon our culture in our company, unbeknownst to us, likely a reflection of leadership at some level. But there are these underlying issues and things that we have to deal with that we don't wake up thinking about them. They just tend to happen in the normal. And so when I think about that, organizations, I have something that I call the coat check factor. And the coat check factor is when your employees are coming to your office, if they feel because of your culture that they have to check a portion of who they are at the door, like they would their coat, then I can promise you're probably not getting the best out of that employee.
Right. Because
they're having to leave a piece of who they are behind to fit in. And it's become such a cultural norm to do this that we don't even think twice about it.
Yeah. I think about in the early 2000s, it became, and it still is today, the idea of bringing your whole self to work, and that being a goal of a culture, and thus these processes underneath that would support that, the training programs and what have you. However, one of the things that you have highlighted for me and what you just shared and earlier today when we discussed in preparation for this was that it's the little things. It's being attentive to the little things, both from an advocate, an ally, as well as someone who is a Black American or who has a visible difference from the status quo or from the norm, the majority. And so, being empathetic, being courageous to intervene in some cases, maybe being the non-Black person and going to the table where the Black people are sitting to build a bridge that, the other way. So, can you speak to the little things? So it's not just this systematic program, it's really just being fully present and really seeing people for who they truly are.
That's great. I think I'll start this. I'm gonna get to a story I specifically even told you earlier today that I wanted to share. One of the things that I started Jeremy Blogs about a year and a half ago, and it's really the first time I've told my story. I wouldn't say that I've run from my story in my past, but pretty much I have. To get acceptance, to make it as an entrepreneur, I didn't lead with my story. I didn't lead with my why. And it's almost like, it's not that we're ashamed. It's just, I'll give you one old story of overcoming a poverty mentality. So I started, my company in 2004. In 2006, we landed a global client in New York. And I probably flew to New York every month or every other month to visit this client. And I remember vividly waking up early and buying the cheapest breakfast I could, eating a $1 slice of pizza for dinner at night. I would just work, 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 work. 2 years into this global deal that we had with this major firm, someone asked me, so you've been in New York like 20 times. How many Broadway shows have you seen? And unfortunately, my answer was none. I didn't grow up with enough to even consider that as an option. So even with success in business and success in life, that didn't really come. I mean, obviously now I probably overkill because I saw like every Broadway show, but but it's these little things that make you feel accepted and warm. So I had an executive from this very large visible company that you probably wouldn't think would be supporting initiatives. I took my younger brother, who was living with me at the time, to Romania on a mission trip. And this executive, who didn't even have the same life beliefs that I had, felt like it's important for me to help my brother grow and to make this impact. And they actually donated to the mission trip that I was on. But I had to be willing enough to talk about a mission trip to get to the point where they would say, how can I help? And I think in our corporate environments, are we comfortable talking about things that really matter? Before all the protests and everything that's happened, I promise you, it would be taboo to go into an organization and openly talk about the things that are being talked about openly now. And so in a sense, progress is just being able to safely have the conversation and to understand on both sides, we aren't there yet. Because for many, we're just discovering that there's even an issue.
All right.
I'll give you an example from 3 days ago. Not 100 years ago, not 20 years ago, 3 days ago. I was at a major car dealership at the Metroplex. I wanted to lease a new vehicle. So I, met with the salesperson. We did all the things. They, got the car. It was short work. I'm an entrepreneur, so I did all the research before. I said, hey, here's the price. Let's do this thing. So it was easy. I wanted to be in and out fast. So then it comes finance term. When you get all the sales thing, you have to go to the finance guys and you sign all the paperwork, right?
Yeah.
So I'd been waiting like 35 minutes. And that's like my upper limit. So I go to the finance director.
I'm done. I'm out. You lost it.
I go to the finance director. I say, hey, what's the status? And he says, oh, you're up next. And Brian, I'm changing his first name, but Brian says, Brian's going to be your guy. And then the finance director says, but I won't even try to pronounce his last name. He's Nigerian. Okay, let me say that again. The finance director, I quote, said to me, a customer, I won't even try to pronounce his last name. He's Nigerian. Yeah. So to me, my HR hat on, I even forget about that. Black hat, HR hat, there's no hats for this, okay?
Right.
I'm thinking the little things matter. Do you care enough about your employee to learn how to pronounce their name? Do you care enough to learn how to pronounce your employee's name? So of course, when I went back, the first thing I asked him was, what was his last name? And how did he pronounce it? And he was kind of surprised. His last name was Onugha, 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 Onugha. I said it 3 times. I learned it in 10 seconds. We all just learned it now.
All right.
His quote to me was this: I've given up on trying to educate people around here.
Yeah, that's so let's run with that story a bit. What is the intervention? What is going to inspire the change and to to echo what doctors Lori Foster and Frida Poli just talked about, they were saying that it's easier to change systems and environments than it is the human brain. And, what are some of the ideas? Is it going to be systematic pressure on that individual that is going to say, hey, that's not okay, that I have to learn people's names and look them in the eye and truly see them for who they are and empathize and be kind and curious? Or is it just going to perpetuate because that individual or collectively there's a laziness that hopes that this is going to pass? I mean, what are your thoughts there?
Right. Well, let's talk about what works the best and then what we will likely have to do. Okay. So what we will likely have to do is a combination of things, which we need to change process, policy, systems, and structures. There's no doubt we have to make it safe to have conversations and make it safe. And there has to be apathy and acceptance on both sides, white and black, other minorities, the whole bit, for us to really journey together. So we do need some corporate structure and things and programs in place, all for those. But at the end of the day, if the hearts of the leaders don't change, then it won't stick. And that's the hard work that takes time and getting your hands dirty. I give an example from growing up that really taught me what's important about ownership and responsibility, and a story of how real success and real change happens within a particular community. So as I mentioned earlier, I spent a good bit of my childhood in public housing. From about the 4th grade or 5th grade or so onward, I was in public housing in Alabama. And almost everyone in our neighborhood was quite poor. I mean, that's the reality of public housing. I remember my mom, she left me a note, a picture that said, "Remember, Jeremy, where you came from." And on that was a copy of the lease. And the lease amount that we had to pay for our public housing project was $45 a month. $45 a month was our responsibility. And so across the street from our project was a park. And, it's kind of the epicenter of fun, basketball court, playground, the whole thing. And you can imagine that those kind of playgrounds could get pretty dirty, pretty messy, lots of cans, bottles, paper, trash. Whose responsibility was it to take care of the park? Or who actually owned the park? Let's just start there. Who owned the park?
Yeah, well, theoretically the city, and that's part of the government, that's the people. So, but that doesn't how it's translated oftentimes. So
the city owned the park. There's no question about it. We didn't own the park. We didn't even own the project we lived in. Yeah. The city owned the park. We don't need to debate that.
Yeah.
Whose responsibility was it to keep the park neat and tidy?
I know this story.
So what's interesting is that
I and you're going to know this. I'm like notorious famous for picking trash up off the beach as I leave it. So I would think it's the community's responsibility in partnership with the city. That would be my answer.
Yeah, of course. Now, if the city sent out a memo, the public housing director sent out a memo that said, "Hey, I like all the residents to keep the park neat and tidy every week." How do you think that would go over?
Probably not well in that situation you described.
So one Saturday, unbeknownst to us, my mom gets us up, my brothers and sisters and I. She says, "Hey, we're going to go clean the park up today." We thought, okay, cool. No problem. Let's go. We're going to go clean the park up. So we went out there. We cleaned everything up. It was nice. It took like 3 or 4 hours. We felt good about ourselves. Next Saturday, Mom says, "It's time to go clean the park up." And I was like, "Yo, that was last Saturday. We did our part. We did our part. We good, right? You're not serious, are you?"
There's other people around here.
Right? She's like, "No, we're going to go clean the park up again." And so that second Saturday is when it starts getting a little bit painful. The third Saturday rolls around, and people in the neighborhood are taking notice. This Tillman clan is out here cleaning up the park. Well, instead of joining in, kids will come and pick fun and they would throw things on the ground. They say, pick it up, slave.
Damn.
Pick it up. These are our own people in our own projects, okay? That's where it got painful. That's where it got dirty. And mom said, go ahead, pick it up. And so we cleaned up over and over. Well, then that's when something interesting began to happen. By the 7th or 8th week that we were out there, every week a few more people would come and they would help. And by the 10th week, we didn't even have to get up and go out because our park was never dirty again. The community, this is the best way to get change, is in collaboration from within. That's how we're going to get to the real answers and the real solutions. And it's going to hurt. And we have to be willing to make it through that difficult part.
Yeah. Thank you for that story, number one. And, you know, congratulations to your mom for raising you in that way. It's obviously ever present in your values and the way you show up. So it's awesome, really. To translate that into someone who, whether it be Black or not Black, is to find a environment and then find a posse, find a cohort, if you will, or small group, and then try and influence change in that sphere of influence. I see so many kind of throwing their arms up because, oh gosh, it's such a big thing. Is it education? Is it business? Is it society? Is it policing? Is it all this? So it becomes overwhelming, and thus no action takes place. Right. So is that the way, when you tell that story, would that be a fair takeaway? It's like, hey, I go to this work every day, or in this remote work area, I'm working with these 20 people, cleaning up the park every week with these 20 people, and maybe inspiring the 20 others that each of those 20 work with, so it actually broadens out. Is that kind of the takeaway from that story?
Yeah, I would look at it in two ways. One, when I think about the solutions in the corporate environment, as I mentioned earlier, it has to start with individuals and leaders within, and every single person. So I'll give you an example of what we can do in our personal lives that will eventually impact our work lives. Is sometimes we find ourselves just consistently with people that are like us for whatever reason. We find great comfort there, and maybe in our pockets and spheres of the world, that's just more people are like us in those areas. So one of the things I challenge families is, if you want your kids to experience more diversity, you can choose to take your kids to a public library in a predominantly Black neighborhood for the story time at that library. And likely your kids are going to engage with students and other people in a very important thing that we can agree on, the importance of reading. But in that environment, for that 30 minutes, they experience diversity. So sometimes we have to leave the comfort of where we are to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And that's an example that we can carry forth in our lives and in our business individually. What can we do to leave our comfort to do something that's uncomfortable for the sake of diversity? And each person can answer that question in your world, in your sphere. Then as companies, I would love to see companies create opportunities for their employees to make community impact. So for instance, every company should adopt a school, or multiple classrooms, or multiple schools, or whatever it takes to give their employees an opportunity to engage, and choose schools that are underprivileged. The reality is we have a big divide in our education, in our public education. And it's not based on teacher pay, okay? Yeah. There are demographics, we don't even need to get into all of them. But the best teachers rarely teach in the toughest environments. So we could adopt schools and allow our people to make impact on those schools. And even now in COVID times, so many schools are welcoming. Like when we adopted a school once, we wanted to ensure that every kid could go on a field trip. I remember as a kid growing up with no money, not being able to go on field trips because I didn't have the $5.
Yeah.
we can impact kids by just making sure that things that are out of the school's control, like the extracurricular activities that cost or whatever, we can adopt the classroom and ensure that every kid has everything they need. We can show up to the things that they do. And so if organizations said, we want to get involved in the lives in an educational way, that alone is a step that we can all agree on. And when we come together, we then learn. Mm-hmm. And like I said, we're not going to get there overnight, but we can take positive steps in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy, I love your ideas, and they're frankly new to me, and I like that. It's like the idea of taking a kid or even yourself or your friends into another environment to better understand and learn and empathize. I mean, it's brilliant. I heard on radio the other day, and it's certainly a different context, but the speaker said tourism sits right next door to peace, is joined in arms with peace. And it was more of an international, go somewhere, you understand, and you have an appreciation, and then you come back and you're able to, relate and advocate. It's not esoteric. It's not scary. And so I'm hearing something similar, is that we have to be willing to travel to a place that is formerly we didn't hang out in, and it's going to be new, and we have to be open to that newness. And to use the language that I've been using is to shrink the inner critic and elevate the compassionate witness. And, don't come in there looking for what right and wrong even. Just, hey, this is what is happening. And, expressing compassion and honoring, the experience of those people within that environment. And maybe ask as simple as, how you can help, because, with your school idea, I think it's, freaking brilliant. Not only does it help in a very tangible way, it helps, the brand, it helps to elevate the community. It inspires. So I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, any thoughts there around that notion of, visiting? And I imagine the same would be true for Black people, maybe going into different situations with an open mind as well. Yeah.
100%. It goes both ways across the board. And not only going into a different environment, but not going into a different environment with these preset notions or tainting that experience before you even get there, mm-hmm. And it's obviously easier from the Black perspective because, I've been in nearly 30 countries. I've been the only Black in a lot of places. There's not that many Blacks in St. Moritz skiing. So, but different experience, Yeah. And I think one of the family values that I have is this thing called purpose, passion, perspective. To live for purpose, with purpose, and on purpose, to pursue our passions. My wife's a music therapist and really encourage her in that area, and to have the proper perspective. And I think sometimes when we go into different situation environments, we have to be okay that they're not going to necessarily meet our expectations. I remember being in Brazil and visiting my wife's grandma, and everybody in the family was like 17 people were in this one little, 3-bedroom house. In that village, they only get water every other day.
Oh, damn.
So you can just imagine the logistics of 17 people showering every other day. But that experience, you can't take away from that. Mm-hmm. And I think we sometimes, our comforts get in the way of opportunity for us to grow. And even African Americans, I still say that Sunday is the most segregated day of the week. Yeah. Because everyone runs to church in their own community with their own people. And it's tough, but we have to all venture out, and you can safely do that when have a goal or an intent in mind of helping, instead of going with an attitude. I think it's just that open mindedness is so important on both sides. And
yeah, when you say both sides, and this is something that I wanted to bring up with you, because it's something that I don't know if it's an opportunity lost or if it's just something that I frankly personally have to accept. So There has been a narrative that is easy to say, that's been perpetuated in American society and via the media primarily. It effectively pits black versus white. And by the very nature on the color spectrum, they're on the polar, which screams adversarial. And even with, correct me if I'm wrong, within the black community, there's light skin, there's dark skin, and are you from Africa? Or you're from the Caribbean islands? It's like there's all these distinctions. And what I'm getting at is that is it black and non-black? How should our language shift? And this is why I'm asking. I am half Mexican and half Norwegian by heritage. And I show up as a non-black or white person. And I don't identify as white because I grew up in a largely Hispanic neighborhood with a Hispanic mom making chorizo and eggs and tortillas and eating menudo and tamales. And, it's just, that's my construct. So when I hear a lot of the stereotypes associated with white people who, treat black people this way, I don't identify with them. But I want to understand how I am perceived by black people. And that's where I frankly have had a lot of growth over these last few weeks and months. Is like, have I done enough? Is it enough for me to be the nice guy when I interact? Or do I need to be more proactive and lead and influence others to be different, whether that be organizations, individuals, or what have you? So a few questions embedded in there, but the higher level one is, what language would you advocate that we be using? Because the black-white thing, I don't think captures the nuances and the diversity, frankly, of American society.
No, great. I mean, you're hitting on some serious points here, Al. Some serious points. So, my wife is from Brazil originally. She's been here 17 years, American citizen, all that good stuff. But people don't realize that the Portuguese controlled the slave trade routes. So as much as the United States got enslaved people, Brazil got 10 times more. Actually, the most of anywhere in the world. 4.4 million Africans. So many people were enslaved in Brazil that when an enslaved person ran away, they wouldn't chase them like they did in America. They would just kind of be free, and they would go on, and they would just buy another one. What would happen is that everybody began to mix and mingle. And so unbeknownst to everyone, 54% of Brazil is black.
Wow.
Now, in Brazil, there's this whole thing of mulatas and all these colors and the various shades, and the disparity in education and in class is unbelievable. The darker you are, it seems like they've just been abdicated for such a long time. And so I think when we look at things in the United States, first of all, I 100% agree with you. Diversity is not black and white. We've made it that. I'm in Texas, okay? Yeah. Dallas ISD is 67% Hispanic. Mm-hmm. We want to make this a black and white thing. It's 67% Hispanic.
Right.
So, if you don't speak Spanish around here, you're kind of behind the times. So it's not just that. You got Chinese, you got Korean, you've got so many people, you got Brazilians. There's the United States is a melting pot in a sense. And we have made it a lot about black and white because of our past. Frankly, it's important because of advocacy in lots of things. But you are being unfairly treated sometimes, Al. And assumptions are being made from blacks and whites. Mm-hmm. My mom, I love her to death. She taught me more about love and compassion than anyone. But she had it tough in Alabama. I mean, she went to an all-black school until the 6th grade. And so she would catch herself saying, the white man, and as if it's like their fault, and this blame shifting and things that would happen. And so if she were to see you and you weren't being compassionate, you will be judged and put into a category that may not be true of you. I frankly think all of us are asking the wrong questions when we meet people. We ask people what they do or where they went to school. Yeah. How about asking people what they enjoy? Mm-hmm. Let's take time to learn people's story, because in our story is our humanity. In everyone's story, we can appreciate and find value in. And in that humanity, that's where we're gonna cure a lot of the issues that we have. If we take time to get to know the story. If you look at all of the police violence and some of those things that are happening, the categorization and the stereotypes that begin to play out lead us to believe things that are just simply untrue, you know? And even the finance manager who assumed that if you're from Nigeria, you must have a last name that's going to be hard to pronounce. Like, that's not necessarily true. You know, Anu is not hard to pronounce. And so I think we're sometimes we are, you know, biased in our approach. And I think that we are categorizing and lumping people without even understanding their story, their purpose, their intent.
Right.
And it happens on both sides. And so that's why I'm all about, if we're approaching things with a solution or with an intent to help and not harm, we're gonna find ourselves a little bit more open to not do those things. But it's a big issue.
I mean, I love what you're saying on a variety of fronts, and thank you for, you know, appreciating these distinctions and taking that question, because it's not an easy one, because I don't want to appreciate the pain of seeing a non-Black person, you know, get out of a nice car and, you know, a nice suit, because, you know, that profile of person has misbehaved for generations. And so, yeah, it might be unfair, but it is understandable. And so, yeah, I appreciate that there has to be open mind to disrupt that mental model on all sides. You know, and doesn't only apply to Black, white, it applies to Native American, it applies to Asian American, Latinos, you know, on down the line. So I appreciate that. My, where I want to toggle a little bit, but it's not much. You mentioned at the outset, we live in a society that doesn't have equal opportunity. And on the Supreme Court, as you likely know, it says all equal under the law. And I know that not to be true. I know that for Black people specifically, that it has not been true. And it's still today in 2020, as absurd as it sounds, is far from being true. So my question to you, the environment is very, very hard. And you have, by some measures, and from a Black perspective, correct me if I'm wrong, have kind of made it, have kind of like run the gauntlet and you know, been to the other side, or you know, are able to enjoy the promise of this country. But then there are those who say the promise is just an illusion, where it's like, to really make it, I mean, you're the exception, not the rule. It's not many people can actually navigate that gauntlet. And there's a famous video, which I'm sure you've seen, you know, take 2 steps forward if you had this, right. And then, you know, so, and I think there's some merit to that. So my pointed question to you, you know, given the realities of today, you know, and I'm thinking from a Black man's perspective now, you know, what do you say to other members of the Black community where they're looking at it and it's like, you know, it's never going to change. It's not, there's that just, okay, this has been 400 years, you know, why now? And do you believe that is the prevailing sentiment, that there's a cynicism that's going to pervade, that, okay, nothing's going to change, it's always been this way, it's always going to stay? Or do you believe this is a true landmark time where we are in fact going to get to a better place?
Well, it's my hope and prayer that we do. But first, I would say that the divide between the haves and the have-nots and the opportunities that America provides, it's going to take us standing in the gap on behalf. We're going to have to look at the issues that have been the prevailing and leading issues for Blacks and even for Hispanics and a lot of people in lower income areas as well, and be part of the solution and take the fight to those areas, as well as changing our mindset. So if I forget, remind me to tell you something about our mindsets and a mistake that even I made along the way. But growing up without a dad, I was fortunate I had uncles and a few and mentors in my life. If it were not for them, that gap was just, it's hard to be filled. We got a lot of great organizations out there, Big Brothers and all these things that are standing in the gap and filling a lot of gaps, but the numbers are just ginormous. And when we look at our education system, and again, we have a lot of working professionals that can be role models and mentors and examples to so many to help bridge that particular gap. And it's not even about race. We got to look at what are the gaps in our societies, and we can't just depend on the government. So African Americans, we have to be the ones who take it in. And I'm at fault myself. The reality is, I tell people all the time, you catch what you're fishing for. If you want diversity, sometimes you have to seek it out a little harder. It's like if you're fishing for a bass, you use a different lure than when you're fishing for a catfish. And so we often catch what we fish for, and even in our recruiting and all those things, it's inherently biased just about the way and the approach that we take in going about it. But it can happen unbeknownst to us. So a year ago, this is a sad story. I was preparing an investor deck. And I had to put together, for the first time ever, I was going to put pictures of those in my advisory circle. And I had 6 people in there. I had 1 white female, and I had 5 older white males in my advisory circle. And I don't believe in 50-50 on anything, but the reality is I didn't value a diverse perspective enough to allow and seek out someone with a more diverse background to join. I found, just naturally in business, connecting with, I gave you the stats.
Yeah.
And so when I put those pictures up, that's when I saw it. When I put that slide together, I said, yeah, I can learn something here. And it's really not doing it just to have someone Black or just to have someone Hispanic or just to have a female in the group just to check a box. No, it's actually believing that there are others with other perspectives that can help us grow our companies and make wiser decisions. And if we say it's important, we have to follow it up in the things that matter most. And those who we surround ourselves with is the greatest example and greatest reflection of where our hearts truly are. And mine had to change. And I think for companies who are looking to be more diverse, it shouldn't be just because, it should be because you truly believe, and it is true, that you're going to find greater value in that diversity, even though that hunt may be a little harder than the norm.
Oh, man, you got some good ideas, my friend. This is really helpful to me, and I hope for others who are viewing and listening as well. We got a handful of minutes here. I have a ton more questions, but they're going to have to wait for another day. And obviously, this topic is not going to go away, over the next month or two as much as we like it. And I'm talking about true social justice and more equitable society. So, any closing comments as that come to mind? Any other stories that you need to get out before we adjourn today?
No, really, I just want to say thank you Al for what you're doing in the work. It's inspiring to me as an African American to see so many people really taking genuine initiative to allow voices to be heard. I think the more positive stories that we hear and stories of pain, as well as hope, then it's just going to continue to raise our awareness, and hopefully it touches our hearts enough that we want to be part of that change. And I want to see this move, which, you know, like I said, sometimes when you're cleaning the park, you gotta go through the dirt. And so a lot of the protests and things are stirring things up. I think that's important. But at some point, we want that to shift into actionable work in our communities. And I really want to just challenge companies to think about ways to give your employees an opportunity to engage in the community, and let's fight the challenges that are there. Bill Gates isn't spending his billions of dollars, whether you like him or not, trying to solve things that are already solved. He's trying to go after the tough problems. And we've got some tough issues in the United States of America and around the globe. Let's try to go after some of those in the ways that we can. And we can always do that locally, because no matter where we are, I guarantee you, there are people, white, Black, Hispanic, all across, that need the support that we can provide. And so let's be part of that solution. And thank you for the great work you're doing, and continue to do it.
Hey, Jeremy, you know, you're very kind, and thank you for your support, and thank you for your contributions. Thank you for your voice and your virtue. I mean, it's really inspiring. And I must say, without letting the cat out of the bag, I can't wait to call you a neighbor before too long.
Right?
at least
out to Santa Cruz.
Yeah, you got to get you in the sand, my friend. Get a volleyball in your hand. Got one right there.
Right.
Back there somewhere. But yeah, and I wish your family you know, safe travels. And yeah, look forward to, you know, welcoming you in person when the time is right. But until then, thank you, and be well. Yeah.
Right. You too.
All right, Jeremy. See ya. Bye.